was 1933, and I must have been 11 years old when my mother announced that we were going to have to spend Christmas with my grandparents. They lived 80 miles north of New Orleans in the Piney Woods area. And my grandfather had a big house, great big house, front porch that would draw rockers where the family sat in the evening and talked about the relatives that weren't there. They'd gone down to get my great-grandmother. She lived right down the road, and she had a little Victorian house. She was in her 90s, and she was sitting by the fireplace tatting. She did miles of tatting. I hear a knock at the door while the women were getting the supper ready. Well, nobody knocked on my grandfather's door. He was a standoffish kind of scholar. He was an important judge. People would have called and asked if they could come see the judge. But I hear a knock, and I start running down the hall, this great big hall, past the hall tree where the straw hats were hanging, and I opened the door, and here was this strange-looking man. I'd never seen anything like it. He was dressed in a fur coat that looked like a porcupine. He had a red face and a few red hairs on his top of his head. And I saw behind him a red roadster, topless and new, shiny. And this man had the nerve to drive across my grandfather's front yard, which I'd never imagined anyone having the nerve to do. And he told me he was looking for his family. When I was just speechless. And then my mother heard me talking. She came running up. I had a tiny little mother, 4'11". She came running up in her high heels, saw the man and spoke to him. He said he was looking for his family, that his mother had sent him down from Kansas to see if any of the family was still living. And he was Meg's son. And Mother said, we don't have any Meg in the family. And she started trying to get rid of it, trying to get him to go down the road. But he just wouldn't move. He just stood there like a log. So Mother finally gave in. She said, I'll take you in to see my grandmother. She's here, there by the fireplace, and she knows the background of all the families around here. Anyway, the thing that was so strange was she didn't seem surprised. He said he was Meg's son, and she said in a calm voice with not showing any excitement at all, she said, how is your mother, dear? And he said his mother was fine and had sent him down to try to locate some of the family. So they got a place ready for him at the table. I figured he must be some kind of relative. He was immediately invited to sit with the family. I had a real silly aunt, my Aunt Charlotte, single lady, and she heard a man in the house. And she got on a black velvet evening dress with a rhinestone clasp. And she came sallying out of the bedroom all dressed up like that. And I thought, I'll absolutely die of embarrassment. But he liked her. And the first thing you know, he was driving my Aunt Charlotte around in that red roadster he had. And that's when I found out who that man was. He was the son of my great-grandmother's younger sister that had run away with a Union soldier. And they had just buried her. They were so bitter that they just buried her. And we never knew there'd ever been a younger sister to my great-grandmother named Meg. Of course, the family was destitute. They'd lost everything. And she saw hope to get away, and she ran off with the Union soldier. A few months later, this old lady comes down from Kansas, and she's rich. The little girl, Meg, had made a good choice. She married into a wealthy Kansas family that owned a great deal of land. And here this old lady comes down in this limousine with a driver in livery. He had gold on his cap and some gold around his suit, and he drove her in style. I saw this elderly lady climb out of her car when they found our house in New Orleans, and I noticed this one shapely leg coming out. And she brought all these sweaters. I had a hole in my sweater, and I know my sister's sweater had a hole in it. It was the bottom of the depression. Soon as she heard some of the family was alive, she had started knitting. So she had a pile of sweaters. But her sight was failing, and so she had little holes in the sweaters where she'd missed a stitch. We could see how rich she was, and we thought, why didn't she go buy her some new sweaters? I got more information when I went to the Library of Congress. There were people there looking up relatives from the Deep South that had been Yankee sympathizers. And there, lo and behold, was my great-great-grandfather. When I read about his story, I began to put the two together. He was attacked first by the Confederates because he was a Union sympathizer and had voted against secession. So the Confederate soldiers came and raided his farm. And then when the Union soldiers were active there, they came over and stripped him of everything he had. Apparently they wanted meat, and they took everything he had. Even his spring wagon, the story said, when he filed his complaint at the end of the war.